Rick and Morty comic Worlds Apart, Issue 1. We start out seeing a dragon from the show say that he hopes someone he knows named Shadow has not sealed himself in the Pleasure Cave. I found it off-putting at first that his text looked different, but thankfully it's perfectly readable, so I can handle it. Thankfully there's a text box saying that this guy is the leader of the dragons of Dragar Realm, Barthromal, which is a kind of long-winded name I'd only really want to use if I have to. Shadow the Elder says he needs to rest. Ball says they have to be swift because they're under attack, and he says he was a fool to doubt the Oracle's prophecy. Okay, that's actually a kind of amusing bit of wordplay with Oracle there. It's crude, but it's making me smile. Out of nowhere, some humans show up to threaten them, one of which is called an assassin, and there's also a butler and muscle. If they don't have personalities beyond that, I'm only gonna feel like calling them, at best, by their descriptions, and at worst, the bad guys. I assume each one of them is gonna do something that matters. Otherwise, there'd be no point in having more than one of them. I think the portrayal of the dragons from the show here was supposed to be based on the fact that in D&D lore, dragons can have kids with anything, according to TV tropes. So knowing that helps me forgive that, because it's not literally just vulgarity for the sake of it like it looks like. It actually is based on something. The humans say that the careless ways of the dragons must be ended, and the dragon trainers want to take over the realm. What makes them think they can beat a bunch of magical dragons? They must be packing some serious firepower. I'm kinda glad there's a brand new antagonistic team, because right now it's helping to make up for the fact that it starts out entirely focusing on the dragons, who I never really liked. It's so predictable that the humans are immune to the dragon fire. Why else would they have been so confident? I'm glad it explains that they have a force field to protect them instead of them literally having fireproof skin, because that'd have been harder to buy. It turns out the dragon drainers really live up to their name, as the bad guys want to drain the dragons of their soul energy. She doesn't explain what she wants to do with it though. So for all I know, while she is upsetting them, she's got a noble goal in mind. It's unique for her to have a pink whip, and very unique for the villain team to look like they do when they've got a goal like this. It's like they only look that way because of the planet they're on. She puts the whip around the head of the dragon, because the dragons didn't think to fly away in all the time she had been talking. The elder dragon fires a ray at her whip to make her drop it, and his friends told to fly away, and he reluctantly agrees and is told to summon their allies, Rick and Morty. I was wondering if they'd show up at all. Thank goodness. Then we see an interdimensional cable episode where a plant pot person is a surgeon, but is being taken completely seriously. Jerry asks how people see out of those things, by which he means the plant pot, and Summer says that doesn't matter because everyone knows that the masked surgeon is raked. Why is she watching it then? Beth says those incisions were amateurish. I like that her job as a surgeon is being taken advantage of here for interdimensional cable because she's the expert on this. She says that her guess is it's a doctor under all that papier-mâché, which would be a good way to distract from all the lawsuits, apparently. So this page is just creative padding, but at least its creativity is trying to make up for the dullness. Someone loses a patient and there's too much dumb jargon, and finally there's a knock on the door. And instead of the dragon showing up, someone named Grandpa Leonard shows up, and everyone's unhappy. Jerry asks his father what he's doing here. I'm pleasantly surprised that he's being used again after just one episode in the show, which didn't even show off what he was normally supposed to be like. Instead it was all just repeatedly mentioning something, and mentioning it was supposed to be the joke. He tells Jerry that his wife went on a couples retreat in Alaska with Jacob. These are an alternate universe version of the parents of Jerry from the pilot universe, so I naturally assumed this wouldn't be brought up and they get to be characters beyond that. Is there anything else? He says he keeps getting photos of his wife's time with Jacob, which he's interestingly happy about, and he wants to connect with the family for once and politely asks Rick if he minds sharing them for a few days. I wish the artist actually knew how to draw Rick though. Morty gets fed up and doesn't want to talk about a stranger romancing his grandma. I thought it was supposed to be Jerry who was in this position. This seems out of character. I don't remember Morty being like this at all. Rick's really proud of Morty though. Morty says he's really tired of his other grandpa acting like they should be fine with private, not normal stuff. As if his life is normal. I find this tedious because I'm still waiting to see the normal day-to-day life side of Jerry's dad, not just this failed attempt at a running gag. At least he isn't divorced or widower, which is what I assumed at first when he showed up at the house without his wife. And then I would have made a crack about how bad marriages run in the family. Summer puts her hand on his shoulder and says that she thinks his relationship is nice, and the only reason she doesn't want to spend time with him is that he's old. Apparently Rick is an exception. She kisses his forehead as he maturely says, "Fair enough, sweetie," and she says she loves him just like that. That was easy. Rick looks unhappy as Jerry's dad complains that this is what he was afraid of, and asks how Morty's parents connect with them. Beth says they're just laying low until they move out. Jerry says that Summer intimidates him. That makes sense actually, considering that she's a lot like Rick. I'm glad he called him Lenny so I got reminded of his name. Rick tries to give him advice, but surprisingly, Lenny interrupts him and says that he's part of the problem because Morty is taking on some of his unwanted behavior. He's pretty smart. It makes sense that he'd think this already, because Rick was clearly smirking when Morty yelled at him. Lenny lampshades that Morty's no longer the sweet, sensitive boy who used to enjoy sleepovers in the living room and flying kites. Rick says that boy was a loser and is cathartically told off, "You're a bad influence on the boy." Now we finally get to see how he really feels about him. Now we're getting somewhere. Then the dragon shows up to tell Rick that he needs his help, and introduces himself to him as the dragon leader for the first time, apparently. He explains that Lady Finn got an ancient weapon with forbidden power, and she wants more. His dialogue being so formal is annoying me. He explains that she can drain a dragon's energy forever, and that she wants to become the most powerful being ever. Oh, that's way more cliche than I thought. Too bad she doesn't want to use it to power an energy grid for her city. That would have been nice of her. I'd expect Rick and Morty to have a bit of a subversion of the audience's expectations, like in the Dungeons & Dragons arcs. After a silence, Rick casually says that he's not going to help the dragons, and fortunately Morty's opposed to this, and Rick explains himself. He says that it all just feels one note. He at least is sorry to hear about the death of his species, but he's not invested in the material, so he can't do his best work. Rick tells Morty that he doesn't repeat adventures because it cheapens the brand, and always ends poorly. He speaks in pure meta logic, only caring about what a potential audience from another universe might think, saying that the story might not deliver on the promise of the original, or it could be a hit. Rick says he has something better in mind, and a bunch of stuff glows around him as Morty's impressed. He says that Leonard really bothered him, so he's calling him that now? Apparently he desperately insists that he is a great influence on Morty, and says that he'd be worse off with him not around. I guess he only admits that he's a lost cause sometimes, when he's in the mood. He says that in this pocket dimension, time flows differently, and he wants to witness the birth and death of a universe in just a weekend by himself. Why does he care? What does he have to gain? He wants to mold a whole civilization to his whims, like Eggman, or any generic Final Fantasy villain really. Usually he doesn't care about this, and that's what keeps him from being a cliche. But by this point, I've seen so many stories with him that I'm actually able to appreciate seeing this because of the one thing he never did before. Rick desperately insists that his little pocket universe will be capable of amazing things. Does he not remember the episode where he molded his civilization to what he wanted for a talking planet? They weren't that impressive people. The civilization wasn't that impressive. Maybe his memory of that is why he wants to do this. That, and he wants to be free of Lenny's crap. Morty reluctantly agrees instead of begging him to help the dragons and asks where he's going, even though Rick clearly said he was going to be alone. Rick says he's going to take a vacation and prove what a failure Jerry's gene pool is. Considering that the story was called Worlds Apart, I always assumed that they were going to be separated from each other against their will. So I was looking forward to what kind of cataclysmic event would separate them. Morty doesn't want to be left here, and Rick somehow thinks he's going to live for 15 billion years. Rick points out that Morty doesn't like the dragons either, like in the show, and leaves. Predictably, Lenny asks Morty to fight for the dragons because he needs help. It'd be interesting to see him deal with Rick's crazy adventures for once, and without Rick there. He says that he may not be a superhero, but he has a lot of experience with dressing like one. Meanwhile, Rick looks at a universe from his spaceship, forgets that Morty isn't with him and is disappointed, and his spaceship detects something and makes noise. He tells his computer to visually confirm spectral scans, and he's not able to get the information because Bird Person must have changed his password and he's not a subscriber. Then he sees a different version of Rick, who looks intimidating and was doing the exact same thing at the exact same place. Well, coincidences do happen. This issue is about the leader of the dragons from the show needing help against a woman who can drain the power of the dragons in a cliché quest to try to make herself omnipotent. I guess we'll never know what her parents were like to make her that way. The only thing refreshing to me there is that she's a girl and not Eggman or Sigma. Also, Morty is confronted with his other grandpa and can't stand him because suddenly it's him who has a problem with his happy three-way relationship, when that's normally Jerry. And you'd think after everything he's been through with Rick, he wouldn't mind this. Because Rick actually inconveniences him, scares him. Also, Rick's gonna try to take over a universe, which I should have expected since he's always been a control freak. But what took him so long? He couldn't even stand to administrate a store. He burned down a store the minute he was expected to do any paperwork with it. He ran a civilization of Gaia's, but only because Beth told him to. And Morty gets asked by Jerry's dad to help the dragons.